This week on the latest episode of The Big Show, we'll discuss the best film trilogies of all time. From The Godfather to Jason Bourne, we'll talk about some of our favorites and list out our top five. Plus, we'll review several new films this week, including Dandelion, Fly Me to the Moon, and Tyler Perry's Divorce in the Black. We'll have all that and more on the latest episode of Keeping It Real with Film Gordon. Let's go.
Experience life through the eyes of a true film addict. Keeping it real with Film Gordon.
Keeping it real. Keeping it real with Film Gordon. Keeping it real. Keeping it real. Keeping it real. Keeping it real with Film Gordon. Keeping it real. Keeping it real. Keeping it real. Keeping it real.
All right, and welcome to the latest episode, Keeping It Real with Film Gordon. I am Tim Gordon. I am joined by the one, the only, Charles Kirkland Jr. Charles, what's going on, man?
Well, it's a real good day in the neighborhood, partner. I'm glad to see you.
It's a real good day, all right. Got a new Tyler Perry movie coming, man. What's the second one of the year?
If you count it, I mean, if you count this as a movie, well, yeah, okay.
Wow, man, you're not supposed to review Tip, man. I'm just saying that, Mia Culpa was in spring, and now we have Divorce in Black here in July. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And so we got a lot of stuff happening, man. I mean, we're in the heart of summer, man. The film business, it's kind of interesting. I know we just had Inside Out that exploded at box offices a couple of weeks ago. What else was that last week that Inside Out came out, or was it a couple of weeks ago?
Oh, it's been a few weeks now. Inside Out was like 3 weeks before the holiday.
Oh, I know what I was gonna say. Not Inside Out, but Despicable
Despicable
Me
Me.
4 exploded. So it seems that a lot of the family content is the content that is doing really, really well right now. So that's cool, man. I mean, so any other observations, Charles, that you have over the last week or so?
Well, to me, it seems like we were worried about the summer box office, and we shouldn't have been. It looks like it's kind of evening out.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's evening it out, man. I think that, we talked about it and had been talking about it since the beginning of the year, that with the strikes last year and some projects that had gotten pushed, I think that, what we've been seeing with the inconsistency with the box office numbers is part the movies may not be really reaching the audiences and appealing. And despite the fact that critics think these are some good movies, like we talked about movies like The Fall Guy, and I forget what was the other movie that I think we fell in love with earlier.
Furiosa, Mad Max Furiosa.
Furioso. I think that despite the fact that these may be critically acclaimed films, it's just not touching audience. And audiences, I hate to keep harping on this because I feel like I'm beating a dead horse. But post-pandemic, man, our viewing habits have changed because you've trained the audience over the course of 2 years that they don't necessarily have to come to the movies to see every movie as it was before pre-pandemic. So I think some of the inconsistencies we see are about, the new viewing habits. Some of it is about the strike last year, and some of these films aren't really connected with audiences. Charles, you got anything on that, or am I off base?
Well, I think maybe I think we talked about it before that when the summer comes around, they're going to be a little more selective, but they're still going to turn out. I mean, they're going out for their entertainment. Now, when we're talking about stuff that happens really before the summer, before the school was out, like Mad Max and Fall Guy, you got people who are like, oh, this is not really where I want to spend my money. And matter of fact, had a lot of people tell me that they didn't go see Mad Max because they felt that they could experience the film at home just as well as they could in the theater. and because of the sound systems and stereo systems and all that stuff that people have nowadays, that it wasn't really that kind of story that was driving people to the theater. So, yeah, people are going to be selective with their money. It's money. It's all about the money.
And you talk about it all being all about the money, Charles. We've talked about it on this show a couple of times, man. I know we get to go see movies for free. Movies, trying to take a family to the movies is not inexpensive these days. So you're absolutely right, man. I mean, people are paying money monthly for streaming services, whether it's a Netflix, Hulu, Disney. I mean, this stuff starts to add up. There's got to be at some point I'm not going to use the word, I mean, use the phrase a breaking point, but there's got to be a point at some point. We got to look at this, or the entertainment industry has to look at this at some point and go, I don't know, man. I mean, the dollar, I mean, I realize that, we got a really strong economy right now, but I don't know how long you can sustain trying to pay for entertainment dollar. Concerts are just ridiculous these days. All forms of entertainment. None of this stuff is inexpensive, man. So something's got to give, man. And I think the old model, as we know it with films, that might be the one as we're witnessing it now, Charles. And I think the other thing to remember and to really pay attention to is we're in the summer right now, where it's tent poles and kids are home for the summer, and a lot of family fare has been doing well. Let's see what happens when we get about 2 months from now, when we're in September, October, and it's award season, to see how, because traditionally there's been some movies that connect, and then there are these critically acclaimed films that we go and go gaga over, and people are like, So let's take a look and see by the time we get to the end of the year how it all fleshes out, man. Once we see some of the huge films that are going to be released much later on in October, November, and December as well.
Well, you talk about those. Well, the end of the year, the prestige film time of year is really not that much of a box office draw. People don't turn out for what those critically acclaimed films like we think they should,
Nope.
and the things that are Oscar bait. They really rarely moves the needle for the regular casual moviegoer. So we'll see what happens in the fall.
So I don't know, man. Like I said, it all bears watching, man. But I always want to make sure that we at least start a conversation around that, because every Sunday afternoon I'm coming out of church and I'm looking at the box office numbers and I'm like, that's pretty interesting this week. So Charles, it looks like we've lost another luminary today, man.
Yeah, I said this maybe 2 weeks ago when we had the guy from New Jack City. What's his name?
Oh,
Anyway,
from Oh, Bill Cobb's.
Bill
William
Cobb.
William Cobb, yeah.
It seemed like every week there's going to be somebody that we're going to say, "Oh, we lost some." It just seems like every time we do a show, somebody we lose. So yeah, we lost another one.
Yeah, man. So Shelley Duvall, man. Oof, The Shining, man. I saw Shelley Duvall in a lot of stuff, man, back in the day, man. So I was like, oof. It's pretty interesting, man, because I think we're at that age, Charles, when you're over 50, that there are people that you grew up watching, and at some point, even if their names are quiet and you don't hear much from them, it's like this sort of news is almost like just instantly just takes your breath away. You're like, oh snap, oh, that person's gone. Oh man.
Yeah.
So at least that's my experience. What about you when you hear these these folks that are just suddenly leaving us?
And I think it's also that because we're so plugged into movies too, because when I mentioned Shelley Duvall to my family, they were like, "Who? Wait a minute." And I said, the one that was screaming on the other side of the door, "Here's Johnny." And they go, "Oh, that girl. Okay."
Mm.
And so I mean, they don't know what she did in Popeye and Roxanne and all the other things that she's done in her life to really appreciate her work. But we're movie fans, we're cinephiles, so we're gonna remember people when they pass. So yeah.
Yeah, man. So it's a pretty interesting place to be in, man. But Shelley Duvall, man, how old was she? We 80, was she 85?
75, 75.
75. Yeah, so 75 years old, man. Wow. Yeah, man.
Pass away from complications from diabetes.
Mm. Yeah, that's not good. That's not good at all, man. So yeah, so Shelley Duvall, man, joins William Cobb and a host of other people, man. It seems like every year every week, not about every year, every week we do this show. To your point, Charles, we're saying goodbye to somebody, man, every week.
Yep. Yep.
Wow. All right, man. So any last words on Shelley Duvall or her career?
Yeah, well, like I said, we a lot of people recognize her from The Shining, but Roxanne was one of them. Growing up was one of the films that I love. I love Steve Martin doing the take on the
Cyrano.
Cyrano de Bergerac,
Mhm.
and she played Roxanne's friend. Well, no, she played the chief's friend in the film, and so yeah, she's done a lot of stuff, and so it's sad because a lot of people just don't recognize the name, but it's one of those people that you recognize the face. So
Yeah, man. So Shelley Duvall, man, gone at 75. And did we get a chance to talk about Bill Cobb, or did you talk about Bill Cobb a couple of weeks ago when I wasn't around?
yeah, you weren't around, and that fell in my lap, and I made sure I paid. I did a good 10, 15 minutes on Bill Cobb because he's one of those character actors that he's always in stuff. People will recognize him when they see him, and then like I said, his big role was in New Jack City, where he played the 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 grandfather in the tenant in the I can't think of and the Carter.
Oh, in the Carter. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I didn't know where you were going with that one. I was like, you said he played the grandfather. I was like,
I
yeah,
mean, but
he did. He
he played
did.
a lot of grandfathers.
He was, well, he did. He actually did, man. And it's funny because you talking about New Jack City, where I remember Bill Cobb was in the film Tuesday Morning Ride, which made history, and it's always something
Yeah.
I will remember because that's the film that I told you that what's the sister who did God Freedom Hair that was at our festival this year.
Diane Houston.
Diane Houston directed Bill Cobb and Ruby
Yeah.
Dee in that film, and that was the only nominated film by an African American in 1996. And I had an opportunity to finally see it. I don't know, maybe 3 months ago for the first time, and Bill Cobb was great in that film, man. So I think about him in those sorts of stories and some of the early television work that he did, man. But Bill Cobb is another one, man. I mean, and I think there's a saying that I read once upon a time that people are never forgotten if somebody speaks their name, man. And I try to make sure that we acknowledge the work that some of these folks did, man, because we're on their shoulders, man. These were the young artists. Like right now, we're kind of in a place, as you call this, cinephiles, as I hold up my cinephile cup. That we see all sorts of actors that have come, that have gone, but they all make their contribution, man. And whether we're talking about Shelley Duvall, whether we're talking about Bill Cobb, they all gave us something to watch and something that we can delight in. And for that, man, we should at least take a couple of minutes, man, to acknowledge the work that they did. And Charles, good job on Bill Cobb. But I just wanted to make sure I said my piece about him as well.
No problem.
Yeah, man. So all right, so before I move on, man, uh, anything else you want us to tackle?
Well, yeah, actually, I know we're gonna do movies in a minute, but I just want to shout out to Netflix for this series Supercell. If you
Oh man.
haven't and Supercell is fantastic. I mean, if you're a black nerd like me who love comic books and superheroes, this this is great, and it has an English accent on it, so it's really cool. And if you haven't had an opportunity, it's a 6 episode series. You Netflix has really got a gem on their hands.
Well, you know, it's interesting you would bring that up because I finished it, I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday. And I was like, you better hurry up and rush another season, man, because you're just gonna leave us all hanging like this, man.
Right,
Man.
right.
You know, I was waiting for what is it, the Superman storyline where you know he flies around the planet really, really fast and he can turn
Fast, it makes
the
it
time
spin
back?
backwards.
Yeah, man. I was waiting for a turn back the hands of time moment, man. And y'all just left me hanging, man. So I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
they did.
whatever, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, Supercell, you're right. It's a really good series on Netflix. You know, black superheroes. We like
yeah.
that. Yeah, we
Love
like
it.
that. And we
Love
like
it.
that. All right, man. So now let us jump into what I wanted to hit today. Is I wanted. It's funny because a couple of days ago, you know, where the inspiration for these things come from, Charles, is because Charles knows that when I'm at home, I'm like on my computer to the point while I'm working in the daytime that I treat movies like most people treat music, right? You know, you guys figure out you want to do a music playlist. I have a movie playlist, so I can pull up almost any movie I want to see. Let me rephrase that. I could pull up any movie I want to see, not almost any movie I want to see. And for whatever reason, Charles, the other day, I think I was watching, I was hooked into this Game of Thrones theme, you know, House of Dragons theme, which is really Game of Thrones themes. And I said, I love the Lord of the Rings theme. So I started listening to that. And then I made the mistake of watching or going online and doing some research. And I started reading about my least favorite of the three Lord of the Rings films, which was the second one, The Two Towers, right? So then I watched the end of The Two Towers and I was like, okay, cool. And then I went and watched the end of Return of the King. And it's funny, Charles, because from the time that Frodo and Samwise Gamgee get picked up off that rock in the molten, the you know, all of that molten lava in Mordor to the end of the film when Samwise closes the door, it's like
Yeah.
20 minutes, man. So it's like, I looked at the timestamp when I was watching it because I said, man, I remember being in the theater, Charles, and it seems like that movie could have ended like 5 times, and it kept adding on more. So it was like, you know, uh, what my young friends, you don't bow to anyone, and they all bowed to him, and I was like, okay, that's it. I remember being in the theater, and every time I started to get up on my chair, I was like, oh, there's more. Okay, cool. So then we get to the scene where you know, he gets married, Samwise Gamgee gets married, and they have to bid Gandalf farewell on the ship, right? And you see Frodo get on the ship, and I'm like, oh God, okay. Oh, damn, there's more?
Well, see, for the audience who doesn't know, Tim Gordon has a habit of busting a move before the credits actually roll. He's like,
Look,
I'm out.
man, there's more. So when it finally ended, I said, because I always wanted to know what was the amount of time that Jackson spent, you know, after the edits in the wrap up. So it's 20 minutes, man. It felt longer than that, Charles. Didn't that feel longer than 20 minutes to you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Man, so
It's just because the adrenaline has worn off and we're just like coming down off of it and we're like, okay, let's just wrap this up. And he's like,
did,
no, but I got to finish the story.
did you realize that the Lord of the Rings Return of the King, which is the third and final part, did you realize that thing was 4 hours long?
Well, the theater cut wasn't as long, but yeah, the there was a set that was released that had the full director's cut in them, and yeah, 4 hours on that Joker.
Well, I know I told this story once, but I'll just give you the condensed version. When I watched that film at a screening, a special screening back in 2003, that 4 hour movie ended up being, I think it started at 2 o'clock and it ended like 20 minutes to 7 because
Mhm.
there were three interruptions that happened where the film broke or popped and they had to repair it. So I remember that was like a marathon. No, it actually started at 1. It started at 1 because they had a lunch, Charles, before the movie started. So it started at 1 and it ended. So it was almost like 5 hours and 40 minutes to watch that 4-hour movie.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Yeah.
That made the trades the next day. I'll never forget. It was in Hollywood. I mean, in the Variety, there was like, yes, marathon Lord of the Rings screening. So yes, but I say all that to say, man, that I have Empire did a list of the top 33 trilogies of all time, and I'm not going to go through the entire list. So I'll just go through the top 10, and you tell me what you think is missing or what should have been in there that's not in here. Now, also remember, this list was updated before I get started. I want to make sure.
2 years ago.
Was it 2 years ago? Yeah.
Yeah.
June of so it's like literally almost 2 years ago, right? So here we go, man. The top 10 trilogies of all time. I don't agree, but we'll get to that in a second. Coming in at number 10, the Evil Dead trilogy, right? The Evil Dead in 1981, The Evil Dead 2 in 87, and Evil Dead 3 Army of Darkness, right?
And how many of those movies have you seen?
None.
Exactly.
What's the Sam Raimi? All right. Coming in at number 9, the Matrix trilogy, right? Which I've seen all 3 of these. The Matrix 1999, The Matrix Reloaded 2003, and The Matrix Revolution 2003, and this is from the Wachowskis, right? Coming in at number 8, and I've seen all 3 of these, the Dollars trilogy, A Fistful of Dollars, A Few Dollars More, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, 1964, 1965, and 1966, all directed by Sergio Leone and starring Clint Eastwood as the man with no name. All right. Coming in at number 7, Indiana Jones 1 through 3, Raiders of the Lost Ark 1981, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom 1984, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade 1989, all directed by Steven Spielberg, and I have seen all 3 of these, right? Yep. Coming in at number 6, the Bourne trilogy, The Bourne Identity from 2002, The Bourne Supremacy 2004, and The Bourne Ultimatum 2007, directed by Doug Liman, who did the first one. Paul Greengrass did the second and third, Supremacy and the Ultimatum, right?
Right.
And again, Charles, since you wanted to put me on blast, I've seen all 3 of these.
Cool.
The next one, we don't even have to say whether I saw it or not. It's the Godfather trilogy. Godfather, 1972, Part 2, 1974, and Part 3, 1990, from the tremendous mind of Francis Ford Coppola. And again, I've seen all 3 of these. The Toy Story trilogy, Toy Story from 95, Toy Story 2 from 99, and Toy Story 3 from 2010, directed by John Lasseter, who did the first 2, and Lee Unkrich, who did Part 3. And again, outside the Evil Dead, I've seen every movie on this list so far.
So far, so good.
Number 3, Back to the Future trilogy. Back to the Future 1985, Back to the Future Part 2 1989, and finally Back to the Future Part 3 1990, all directed by Robert Zemeckis and all seen by Tim Gordon.
Okay.
And coming in at number 2, the original Star Wars trilogy, Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope 1977, Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, 1980. And finally, Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, 1983. George Lucas directed the first one. Irvin Kershner directed Part 5. And Richard Marquand directed Return of the Jedi. Did I mispronounce the man's name?
No, you did it. You did it right. But
Okay,
it's funny. It's funny that when you say Part 2, it really was Part 2. But yeah,
I mean, it was Part 2 when it first came out. Matter of fact,
Right.
it wasn't even listed as parts. It was just like The first one was just called Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. And then we had to kind of like rearrange it, and that's enough.
Yeah.
And then finally coming in at number one, Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, and actually, without going into it, The Fellowship of the Rings, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King, 2001, 2002, and 2003. All right, Charles, and I've seen all of those. So the only trilogy that's in this list that I didn't see any of was the Evil Dead trilogy, which came in at number 10. So let me look around. What was outside of the top 10? The Three Colors trilogy, okay, no comment there. Aliens was outside the top three. I mean, our top 10. That's a good one. I saw three of those. Pirates of the Caribbean, pop culture. Heart 1 through 3. Look, Charles. The Star Wars prequels, no, no, no. The Spider-Man trilogy, maybe. Scream 1 through 3, no. The Vengeance trilogy, that's pretty good. Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, Old Boy, and Lady Vengeance. Ooh, that's some good stuff.
The originals are fantastic. Those films are
pretty good. The Naked Gun. You see my face like, and X-Men 1 through 3. So we'll go there. So my first comment, well, actually, I'm gonna let you comment first. What did you think about the top 10? And would you have moved any of these up or down?
Okay, first of all, I'm calling bogus on this entire list.
Whoa.
For one reason and one reason only. Well, maybe a couple reasons. I don't think the Matrix trilogy deserves to be in the top 10, but there's no way you can make a list of the top 25 trilogies of all time and not have the Dark Knight trilogy in the set. Something is wrong with your list. Something is wrong with the
So are you saying that okay, that's true. But are you complaining that it's not on the list or that it's not in the top 10 on the list?
It definitely should be in the top 10. It definitely should be on the list, and it's neither one of those.
So let me ask you a question. Now, I know I should have set this up a little better, so this will be fault on me, right? When we talk about great trilogies, right? A great trilogy is when all three of the movies are good, right? Now, as I go through this list, and let's start with Lord of the Rings, you literally just heard me say that the first one, Fellowship of the Ring and Return of the King, those are great, right? The Two Towers, I've been saying this since it came out 20 years ago. It was a glue movie. It was the movie they stuck in there that doesn't really move the needle. It's the weakest of the three. Same thing with The Godfather. The first two Godfathers,
fantastic.
The last one, a little redundant, felt rushed because it was. So I'm trying to think of these trilogies that we're talking about. Even when you talk about the Dark Knight trilogy, right? I thought Batman Begins was solid. I thought the Dark Knight is friggin' fantastic.
Phenomenal.
It's the best movie in that set. And then the last one was. So I'm trying to find a trilogy where all three of them are good, and the closest thing I could probably come to would be the original Star Wars trilogy, because all three of those are really, really good. All three of them. So as much as I love Lord of the Rings, and I understand why they put it number one, because when it finally was up for awards, it won all 11 Oscars that was nominated for. So for people who make lists, that's a really big deal. But I'm coming to you, Charles, as a cinephile, and I'm telling you that the original Star Wars trilogy had three really good films in it. Can't take that away.
Nope.
Go ahead. Back to the Future. First one's really good.
The other two were really good.
You thought all three of them were equally good?
Yes.
All right. I mean, I had to trust you. I literally rewatched and have been watching them off and on. Out of these three films, the first one is easy the best one for me in the Back to the Future trilogy.
Right.
The
But
second one, when they go into the future and the fact that now we've lived long enough that we got to 2015 and like the 2015 that Robert Zemeckis imagined was like so off base.
yeah,
It's almost like when you watch Blade Runner, right? And
right.
what was that supposed to be? It's like 2019. And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't understand why when people do the future, that the future is always bleak, man. Like the future is horrible. You don't want to live long enough to live to see the 2019 in Blade Runner or the 2015 in Back to the Future.
Look, that's why people wanted to have Y2K, because they didn't want to get to 2001, A Space Odyssey. They were like, man, I don't want to live that.
Yeah, man. So, but okay, so Charleston. Now, here's another one that I would tell you that it finished number 4, but looking at the metric I set up, it could have been number 2, was the Toy Story trilogy.
Toy Story. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
third Toy Story, that the boy, I was sitting there like this when I watched it. I was like, oh my God, Andy, you're killing me right
I
now.
mean, I'll give Collider credit, Empire credit. I think through the top 4, I think the top 4 trilogies that they list, I think all 4 of them are solid from beginning to end. I probably would have put Toy Story either at 2 or 3 and moved Back to the Future down 1. But no, there's no way I will put, maybe.
Yes,
But
but go ahead.
one, when you talk about Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Toy Story, Back to the Future, I think all 4 of them are solid trilogies that work all 3 films.
So here we go again. This gets me back to an issue. So if
Which
I
brings me,
agree,
which is why I have a problem with The Matrix being on the list. I think the Matrix, the first movie is outstanding,
the
and
other
that's
two are
it.
like,
And the other 2 are horrible. And there's no how
wow.
did they get into the top 10? I mean, there's scenes in there that you love for the action or whatever, maybe, but there's no way that they could think that as a trilogy that works from beginning to end. It's not cohesive at all. First of all, the stories in the other 2 films, Reloaded and Revolutions, are very weak and not it just doesn't work. So for it to
So,
be in the top 10, I'm really upset with. I am.
so wait a minute. So I just have one more film I want to tackle because I think next film I'm going to talk about, it and Lord of the Rings are almost the same to me, right? You have 2 of the 3 that are super strong, and I would add this, and I'm talking about the Godfather trilogy, right? The first 2 Godfathers are so good that they could literally carry the last one. That's kind of literally how that because it is a top 5 trilogy. It really is, because the first 4.5, maybe 5 hours of The Godfather, revolutionary filmmaking. I mean, you got to remember, and I've said this ad nauseum on this show, right? Before, like when you use the initials BGF, right? Before Godfather, they changed the way that these stories were told, because before that they had Gentiles or Jews that would be playing Italian mobsters, and the films never felt. Am I lying, Charles?
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, you're
the
quite
movies
right.
never were authentic, right? So Francis Ford Coppola, an Italian director comes along. He kind of uses his own family, what he knows about family, and Mario Puzo's book, and how they adapt the book, the casting of the story. His own sister's in it. His daughter is in the baptism scene. That Nino Rota is doing the score. This movie smelled like an Italian film, man, and it plays that way. This story of this crime family, but a crime family with a family code. This King Lear story about a guy who has a kingdom and he has 3 sons, and which son will be the one that will inherit the kingdom. The Godfather is a masterpiece, and the second one, literally, if they were racing, the second one by a nose is better than the first one, and the first one is revolutionary. So when your first 2 films are that good, and instead of making Godfather 3 in the 70s, Coppola just, did a couple other things, like a film called The Conversations, Apocalypse Now. So he was still making classic films. So like I said, part three, not as strong as the first two. It does continue the story. It has some casting mishaps. You heard me say it feels redundant to part one, but all in all, man, so here's the question, Charles. Which film is stronger in your estimation? Godfather 3 or Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers?
Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers.
Wow. Okay. All right. So if
Yep.
that's the case, then you would put the edge of Lord of the Rings over The Godfather.
Yeah, I would, and I know that that's hurtful to you to
It's not
hear
hurtful, man. I mean,
because you I know how much you respect and idolize the Godfather in that trilogy, but I think as third movies, as the weaker of the third movie, The Godfather 3 really pulls down the trilogy. I think if it were more solidly done, more maybe if he had not waited so long to do it, and just kept riding the momentum that he had created, it might have been better. But understand, I believe that solidly the second film in the Lord of the Rings trilogy is a better film.
all righty, man. Well, I'm gonna leave that there because we got three movies, man, and I want to get a chance to really let these movies breathe, man. Go ahead, Charles. You got that look on your face, man. What are you about to say?
And I want to say, I think the third Batman movie is better. The Dark Knight Rises is better than The Godfather. And you may hate me for saying that, but I think that too.
Well, honestly, you might hate yourself later on when you figure out that this is recorded, and but it's okay. I mean, come on. You talking about the story where Bane broke Batman's back, and then Batman went and worked out for a year and came back and beat Bane? That Batman?
Yeah,
Okay.
that story.
Yeah. That makes as much sense as one of these movies we're about to talk about. But that's another story. All right, let's get on. Go ahead. Charles, am I lying?
It's classic Batman story that came straight out of the comic books. And there's very little to hate about that.
Okay. I'm gonna let you, you called yourself a black nerd, so I'm gonna let you have that one. All right, Charles. It is movie time right now, man. And let us start off. We got three movies this week. And you heard us talk about it at the top of the show. So let us jump right in to Fly Me to the Moon. A marketing maven, Kelly Jones, wreaks havoc on launch director Cole Davis's already difficult task when the White House deems the mission too important to fail. The countdown truly begins. Greg Berlanti, who has done a ton of television, including All American, God, so many shows that this guy has had his hand in.
Greg Berlanti, you might as well call him Mr. CW, because everything that CW did for a while was
Arrow,
him.
the
whole Arrowverse, that was all him. Yeah.
So he is coming to the big screen with this story that stars Scarlett Johansson, Channing Tatum, Woody Harrelson, and pretty much, man, this is a light comedic version of a film like Capricorn 1, right, where you have a guy who's working at NASA, and they bring in a marketing whiz as the astronauts are preparing for an Apollo mission, and she markets it to the country. And as an aside, Charles, in order to ensure its success, they film a fake sort of moon mission because they're afraid that the real one might not be as effective, and the consequences of how all that stuff works, man. So this movie, man, you didn't get a chance to see this one yet, did you?
I did not. I haven't finished it. I've watched a lot of it, but I really like Scarlett Johansson in the film. It's one of these films that has a basis in real life, because there's a rumors. There have always been rumors that the moon landing was fake, and so hey, I don't know what some people look at this film and go, I told you.
Right. Well, but I'm gonna tell you what I found to be interesting, man. Kelly Jones, who Scarlett Johansson plays, is kind of like this marketing genius, man. And you see it from like the first scene all the way through. And I think what's cute about the movie, in this case is cute, is that there's a romance between these two, even though Tatum and Johansson sometimes butt heads. He's kind of like a really patriotic loyalist, and she's kind of like flying by the seat of her pants, kind of making it up as she goes. And it sort of works. The two of them balance each other off, and I felt that they had some good chemistry with each other. Tatum, to me, it continues to grow as an actor. Johansson has always been solid to me, man, and whatever you give her. So I thought the movie was pretty good, man. I mean, from what you watched of it so far, Charles, what are you thinking?
I agree with you about Channing Tatum. I remember him from his Step Up days, and he's really stepped up his game as far as an actor goes. He did the movie with Sandra Bullock last year, and now he's got again. He just shows that he can create really interesting chemistry when he's on screen. That, like you said, it's what you see between him and Scarlett Johansson is like, wow, that's pretty good. I really buy into them as a couple. I give it an I call it the kiss factor. And so whenever two couples get together on screen, and if I find myself puckering up for the kiss that they're getting ready to do, then I understand that the chemistry works. And I found myself, getting a little puckerish for them. So yeah, I really like the film. I so much of what I've seen of it. I've got to finish it out, but so far so good.
All right, and also let us please acknowledge that there is a wonderful cameo by Mr. Johansson, Colin Firth in the film. That was really funny, man. So yeah, so Fly Me to the Moon, man. This is a solid B. I like this movie, man. I thought, as I said, I thought the story they put a twist on a story that I had heard about or saw earlier, and it also I thought the chemistry that they had and the kind of Berlanti's lightness and the storytelling and his direction. I thought it worked really really well, man. I'm not sure of its chances at the box office this week because is it family enough, man, to generate good box office? I don't think so, but one
Yeah,
has never
yeah.
seen. So that's Fly Me to the Moon, man. So that was pretty good. All right, so next up is a film that we are very familiar with because this movie was the opening night film for the Light Reel Film Festival a month ago. And
Okay.
of course, the film is Dandelion, of course, from Nicole Regal. The film follows a singer-songwriter in a downward spiral as she takes a last-ditch effort gig at a motorcycle rally in South Dakota and falls in love with a guitarist named Casey, who walked away from his dream a long time ago. This film, of course, stars Thomas Doherty, Kiki Lane, and Melanie Nicole King. Charles, you want to start with Dandelion?
Yeah. Well, this film is near and dear to our hearts because it played at the at our festival, the Light Reel Film Festival. It was our opening night film, and because of what it was, we entrusted a lot to it because when you're opening, it's got to be some kind of good. So I think just the fact that it was our opening film should tell people what we think of it. I think it's a masterwork. I think masterwork may be an overstatement, but it's a really good film. Kiki Lane, you see sides of her that you never saw before. I mean, did you know that she could sing before we had seen this film? It's really reminds me a lot of the Once. Remember the film Once, where another one of those things where you're trying to find your voice as a musician. Um, I love the chemistry that she had with Doherty in this film. It just was like real and gritty. And anytime you're making something about the creation of music, I'm all in for it. And so I really enjoyed this film, and just the overcoming at the end is just beautiful. So I really enjoyed this movie from front to back.
Well, I sort of feel the same way you did. I saw this movie like 2 months. So I saw this probably, we had our festival in June. I saw this movie in April. I got an opportunity to get a advanced screening of it, and I loved it immediately. I called Charles up and was like, "I think we found a movie that could at least open the festival." So I wasn't wrong about that. It felt and played like Kiki Lane, who's been in the Old Guard and if Beale Street Can Talk. This was sort of like a breakout role for her. I thought she was really, really solid and exhibited, to Charles's point, some skills that I didn't know she possessed. Right? I was like, man, she sings. Wow. So I thought it was a cute story about a woman who's finding her voice that ends with a third act that I don't think enough people are talking about the third act of the film. So Dandelion, man, a really good film. Not a lot that we need to say about this, man. Kiki Lane continues to grow, and I would love to see her working more. She reminds me a little bit of Nicole Bahari, who is a sensational indie actor who does a little television, but nearly does not get on the radar of enough casting agents to be in some of these larger scale projects. And Kiki Lane is feeling like that to me as well. But she's solid in Dandelion. So what would you give Dandelion as a grade?
I give Dandelion a B plus. I think it's really a solid film from front to back. Again, we talk about Kiki Lane, whose career is on the uptick. Kiki Lane and Taylor Page are kind of like in the same range for me in that, but I like the fact that Kiki is doing different things and expanding her abilities and showing what she can do. Where Taylor Page is kind of stuck to like the same kind of role until we had her in Beverly Hills Cop for Axel Foley. But fantastic actress, and I can't wait to see more of what she's doing.
Yeah, I got you, man. I would go with a B minus. I think Kiki Lane is probably the best thing to like about this movie. I think the story is pretty good. Her performance is really good. Not saying that the whole movie is it matches Kiki Lane. So no disrespect to Nicole Regal on this one, but yeah, that's kind of where I fall. B minus is not bad. I mean,
Oh,
it's
no, not at all.
not bad. So yeah, so that's what I fall with Dandelion, which brings us to our last film, which I saved it for last for a reason. And of course, that is Tyler Perry's Divorce in the Black. And this is a story that follows Ava, a young bank professional who is devastated when her husband abandons their marriage. Um, Charles, I'm gonna start with this one because I've thought a little bit about what I want to say. Couple of things, right? Now, if you watched Keeping It Real with Film Gordon at any point over the 15 years we've been on the air, you sort of have an idea of how I feel, not about Tyler Perry, the person, but Tyler Perry, the writer, director, right? And for the most part, I would say I've been pretty consistent over the course of Perry's career that I have pretty much castigated the work that Perry has done because I think he's an amazing businessman. I interviewed him earlier this year. Really cool dude. But my credibility and the credibility of our show, my organizations, and everything that I do is predicated on my ability to be honest when it comes to filmmaking, right? And also to preference that because I'm not a huge fan of the majority of the work that Tyler Perry does, it's almost the same as what's the name of that director, Charles, that did the Thin Red Line, and he did God, he did a series of films that were in, like 10 years ago that I was like, I just hate everything this guy does, man. What was the movie he did with Brad Pitt and the one that had dinosaurs in it, and I can't remember.
Oh, you talking about Terrence Malick?
Terrence Malick, right? Terrence Malick just routinely makes movies I don't like, right? So it's not a black thing, it's not a white thing, it's an art thing, right? Like I love Brian De Palma. I'm willing to give Brian De Palma, and I've said this to you on the show, if you like a director, you're willing to give that director the benefit of a doubt, like Spike Lee. I like Spike Lee films, right? So I go into them predisposed to liking them because I like Spike Lee's work, or Spielberg's work, or Nolan's work, or Scorsese's work, or any of the other auteurs or directors that I really, really like, right? So having said that, Tyler Perry has had 64 projects. I looked it up on IMDb. Charles, just as a guess, what do you think the highest rated on IMDb, the highest rated Tyler Perry movie? What would you think it would be?
That he made?
That he made, that he directed.
Probably
Just take
somewhere
a guess.
I'll say probably 5 something. 5, 4, 5, 5.
No. That movie hasn't come out yet. I said the highest rated one he's made that's been released into theaters.
Yeah, no, I can't think of anything that would be higher than.
You floundering. Let me help you. What was the one movie I reviewed on this show and I said might be the best film that Tyler Perry ever made? What was that film called?
Oh, I forgot all about it. Jazzman's Blues.
Jazzman Blues. That's the highest rated movie that Tyler Perry's made on IMDb. And it's the highest rated by a lot, right? Because majority of Tyler Perry's movies fall between like 5, maybe 5.8. Jazzman Blues is at 6.8. So having said that, right, I had to look that up because I wanted to trust, like, am I just a shade-throwing hater about Tyler Perry, or am I in a club and, like, people see what I'm seeing, right? Now, having said that, because I like the Jazzman's Blues. We saw it in Toronto. I was like, man, that's a pretty good film. That's the only film he's really made that held my attention from start to finish, and I walked out going, that one was not terrible at all. That was pretty good, right? Now, which leads me back to this movie, right? Over the last 5 years, we've had Mea Culpa. We've had, God, what was that pandemic one he did on Netflix that was just god awful, man? The one with the bad.
You talk a Fall from Grace.
Fall from Grace. That he didn't understand the law when he was writing. That there's a scene where a character is handcuffed and put on a police car, and then the policeman gets a call, and then takes off and leaves the guy handcuffed.
Yeah.
So I've said that part of my issue with this movie, because I had to call my woman in the middle of it, because the first 20 minutes, I was sitting here like my stomach was in knots. Like I was like, I'm really not liking this movie. And I even called Charles, and Charles was watching it at the same time. And he was like, yeah, we'll just talk about it on the show. Charles, I don't understand. And I told this to my love. I don't understand that if you're having some emotional issues, get a therapist, man. Bring in a psychiatrist while you're writing. Bring in a writing partner. Bring in somebody else. And as they say on the streets, make it make sense. Why is it that we have these films that Perry routinely makes that have these professional women, like Kelly Rowland was a banker in her movie. This woman is a banker in this one. There's always these really, really smart women who just make really dumb, life decisions, right? So, and I didn't set this up properly. So pretty much the story is about a woman who's a professional woman who marries, for lack of a better term, like just a ghetto hood dude.
He's a hoodlum.
A hoodlum who doesn't respect her, doesn't love her, and she is in there, despite the fact that her best friend, her mama, her daddy, everybody around her is like, you know you can do better than this. She's like, no, I need to, you taught me to hang in there. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. And as the story evolves, it makes less and less sense because everybody, Charles, everybody knows this dude is crazy except the person that's married to him who's like just so nonchalant. And I just thought it was like after Perry making some moves forward with Jazzman's Blues, Mea Culpa, I was giving him the benefit of a doubt because, you were doing some interesting stuff. This is a bad movie. I'm not going to say it's the worst one he's ever made. This is a bad movie. It's a bad movie. Charles Kirkland, your turn, man.
Okay. You
It's
know,
a bad movie.
my hate game is strong, but when I had my wife watch this film with me, and after we got finished the film, I did a praise dance. And you was like, if this film was so bad, why is Charles Kirkman doing a praise dance? I'm gonna let you go inside baseball. We wanted this film for the Light Reel Film Festival, and we never got it. This is one of those times when you say, God knows. Because if we, oh my God, if this film was horrible from the very beginning of the film, Richard Lawson, who played on All My Children with Debbie Morgan, who's also in this film, Megan Good's parents. He is like the worst pastor I've ever encountered in my lifetime. And I was like, I don't understand. And I mean, nothing made sense in the film. Tyler never took the time to flesh out why in the first place did these two people get together. I mean, I'm like, I am mortified by this film. I don't understand how we got here. The ending tried to redeem it, but it was just dumb from beginning to end, and all the way through. I was just like, this, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. And my wife, she likes Tyler Perry stuff, like all the Medea things she's down for. And she was like, this is not working.
Charles, can I just jump in for a second? Because we got like 2 minutes before we get off the air. I got to put this in. The opening sequence. Now, I've seen Tyler Perry do some drama in his movies. That was ridiculous.
It was
ridiculous.
Horrible.
Ridiculous.
On all sides. On all sides. Everybody involved in that first scene was horrible. And it was just the worst piece of written thing I've ever seen in my life.
So since we got like 2 minutes, man, what are you gonna give it? Because we've said enough, man. It's on Prime. You be the judge. You'll call us up next week or send us emails. Y'all tripping. That movie was good. Okay.
No, I dare you. I dare you to send that to me.
What are you giving this, Charles, as a grade?
Can I go lower than an F?
Nope.
Can I do? Nope. Okay, well, there it is. F.
I'm gonna give it an F plus. Bruh. Or I got a better one for you. I got a friend of mine who, you know, from New York, who loves to say awful. This movie gets 5 awfuls. Awful. I'm sorry, but we got to get out of here, man. As I tell you guys in closing every week, please see something good at the movies, man. You've heard our reviews. You be the judge. On behalf of my man, Charles Kirkland Jr., I am Tim Gordon. It's awful. I'm out. Awful.